So welcome to the 2025 AAUT ICO Briefing sessions. Next slide, please, Danny. We are a small team led by Professor Angela Carbonis, who sends her apologies as she's currently overseas attending conference. I'm Angeline, the awards managers, and joining me today is Danny, our awards coordinators. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of countries. On behalf of those present, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are all joined from today. I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and to all Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders peoples of Australia. There are two parts to today's presentations. Part one, Danny and myself will give you an overview of the 2025 AAUT programs. And part two is the featured presentations titled What Makes a Strong AAUT Nominations by Professor Pattison. So next slide. Here is the quick snapshot of the AAUT nominations and awards trends from 2020 to 2024, focusing on a comparison between 23 and 24. As you could see, that citation nominations slightly dropped last year as compared to the previous, but more awards were actually given. The committee, they were pleased with the strong and diverse field that were being submitted last year. For the program awards, both the numbers and quality of applications have actually improved. All 4 awards were granted, and the committees highlight more consistent use of data and the presence of several long-standing programs. As for the teaching awards, we had the lowest number of nominations submitted since 2018, even though 4 were awarded, but there were no Australian Universities Teachers of the Year was selected last year. And we will hear a bit more from the chair of the 2024 Teaching Awards Committee later in the sessions on this. Although the Career Achievement Awards nominations have declined from 21 to 8 nominations last year, but the qualities of VC endorsed candidates remained high. So as part of our continuous improvement efforts and in response to feedback from the awards committees, the following updates have been made this year. We have added an Aboriginal identity questions to support the Never Born Award. We have revised the video requirements for teaching awards to focus more on the nominees' educational practice and impact. We have removed the nomination templates to encourage personalized narratives that address the selection criteria and replace the program overview with a detailed frequently asked questions section. So, what are your roles and responsibilities as the ICO? You as the ICO serve as the bridge between the AAUT Awards team and your institutions. And your responsibilities include serving as the center point of contact for all AAUT matters, uploading nominations to the awards portals, sharing AAUT updates and communications with your institutions and nominees, such as AAUT newsletters, and we encourage you to post it on your intranet as well as promoting AAUT within your institutions using the resources available on the UA and AAUTN websites. There are 5 awards types. Each has its own categories and documentations requirements, but all are assessed against the same criteria for citation program and teaching. And as you are all aware of, that the Teachers of the Year Awards is being selected from the Teaching Awards recipient, and Career Achievement Awards has its own set of criteria, and the nominations actually being put through by the VC. Next slide. So the awards categories largely remain the same this year. Please note, I won't go in details, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Danny or myself. And next slide, Danny. Here are the awards requirements. The recommended pathway is to start with citations by addressing 1 subcategories. If successful, build on this by addressing all 4 subcategories to apply for a teaching awards. And as you could see, that there are different documentations requirements for each of the awards, ranging from 4 pages to 8 to 10, to supporting materials, program for teaching, and for program awards as well. Next slide. There are 2 assessment metrics, and they are largely the same. One is actually used for citation program and teaching awards, while the other one is customized for the Neville Bonner Awards. Now I'll hand over to Danny to talk through the rest of the AAUT programs.
Thank you, Angeline. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I look forward to meeting with you today and collaborating with you over the coming weeks as we enter the 2025 round. So just to reiterate, this year we are really keen to see more applications, particularly in the Neville Bonner Award category. So last year we did see several citations with a focus on embedding First Nation knowledges into the curriculum and building partnerships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, as well as one excellent Neville Bonner citation. However, we didn't have any applicants for the teaching awards in the Neville Bonner category. So we would love to see more applicants, in particular for teaching awards, to really showcase the great work that Indigenous educators are playing around the country. Associate Professor Kerry Bodle, who received the award in 2023, has shared the profound impact that receiving the award has had on her career already. So we would love to see more of these great educators recognised. So there's a few different ways that an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander applicant could apply for an AAUT award. They can apply individually or as part of a team. If they're applying for part of a team, all members of the team must be Indigenous for them to apply for the Neville Bonner Award category. And as Angeline mentioned, the Neville Bonner matrix does differ slightly because it also includes recognition from Indigenous communities and elders as part of the criteria, and also an engagement with the Indigenous scholarly literature in addition to the general literature. So nominees could choose to apply for a citation or teaching award under the Neville Bonner category, or in teaching awards and citations, they could also apply in any other eligible subcategory. So a few years ago, we did have an Indigenous educator apply for the Teaching Excellence Award who applied under her discipline-based subcategory. So just something to keep in mind. And of course, they can apply for a program award as well under any eligible subcategory. So the nomination process.
Sorry, Danny. Sorry. I'll just add on to what Danny has said. Can we go back to the slide?
Sure.
Danny, the previous one. Yeah, just to add on what Danny has said, to encourage more nominees for the Neville Bonner Awards and Indigenous educators to participate this year, we are working very closely with Susan Page to come up with a Neville Bonner campaign. ICOs, we will send through the information very shortly. And some of you may remember that in 2021, we kick off a very similar campaign. So we'll bring back that campaign this year to work in this area. Sorry, Danny.
No worries. Thanks, Angeline. Okay, so what you're probably all quite interested in is the nomination process. So as Angeline mentioned earlier, ICOs are responsible for gathering all the information, the nominations within your institution and the supporting documents, ensuring that they meet all the requirements listed in the guidelines and then entering them into the awards portal. So this year, the nomination period will run from the 25th of August to the 10th of September. The sample nomination forms on the website and that you've been emailed are there to help you gather all the information that you'll be required to input. So we've kept this as a Word document, as we know some institutions use their own online platforms, your own award systems, or you might choose to use that Word application form. And for those who are new to the awards portal, as new as an ICO this year, welcome. We will be doing a refresher and a Q&A session where we'll run through the awards portal at the start of the nomination period. So we'll be there to support you through that process and available 9 to 5 throughout the nomination period with any questions you have. Nominations can be edited until submission. So after they've been submitted, all the way up until the deadline, which will be midnight, the 10th of September. So this is just a quick snapshot of the awards portal. So it will be similar to last year. There's been some slight changes based on your feedback, including the ability to revisit and edit an application until the deadline. And as I said, we'll run a Q&A session and a demo to support anyone new to the portal or who would like a refresher. So in terms of resources to help you effectively support your nominees, there's plenty of resources available on both the Universities Australia website and the AAUTN website, the network website listed at the bottom of that page. So the nomination tips from assessors are updated every year with specific areas of advice that have come straight from the mouths of the assessors, along with writing tips for Neville Bonner nominees, which has been provided by the Neville Bonner assessment team. There's also the assessment matrices, and just worth noting that on page 2 and 3 of those documents, there's also a guide, key elements of a successful nomination kind of cheat sheet that we encourage you to refer your nominees to as well. Many of you will have heard of the AUT Mentor Scheme. So we have a fantastic mentor program where 59 mentors are currently listed on the AUTN website across a range of disciplines and who have been successful in receiving citations, teaching awards, program awards, and Australian University Teacher of the Year awards. So for institutions who may not have as many resources dedicated to L&T in this kind of grants process, or for those who just want an extra set of eyes and ideas to help them support them through the process, it's a great program that we encourage you to utilise and refer your nominees to. There is also a video archive with several series on there with words of advice from past award recipients. And on the AUTN website, you'll find a trove of valuable information. It's a little bit more detailed than Universities Australia website, which focuses on what you need to know for this round. There's more historical information on there, including PD sessions from previous years as well. So for those who've been ICO for some time, you'll know this assessment process well, but for those that are new, there is a 3-stage assessment process that we follow here at Australian Awards for University Teaching. Initially, so we start in September, October with the recruitment of assessors. We receive recommendations from DVCAs across the country, and then we try to match them up to the nominations based on discipline, expertise, and trying to get a broad range of assessors with L&T experience. Then each application will be reviewed by several assessors, each individually, which is called the individual assessment stage. They then come together for stage 2 of collaborative assessment, where they meet and discuss the nominations as a team before agreeing on a rating, score, and feedback for each nomination, where they make a recommendation to the awards committees whether to award or not award the nomination. These are then provided to the relevant award committees, made up of very experienced senior leaders in education, many of them DVCAs, to review all the nominations in each award category and moderate and accept the recommendations or adjust the outcomes as they see fit. And finally, the committee recommendations are provided to the Universities Australia Board for endorsement in January. So this rigorous process has been fine-tuned over several years, and we're very lucky to have a very engaged team of assessors that often come back year on year. So they have a lot of experience reviewing these nominations. So PD sessions for nominees, something you're probably all quite interested in as well. So this year we've given the shorter time frame that we have available until the nomination period, and given there haven't been any changes to the award categories and matrices, we've decided to have 2 targeted PD sessions this year to help strengthen the quality of nominations, and that will be for applicants across all award categories. So we'll be looking at, we encourage you, if you've got any new nominees, the 2024 suite of PD sessions, where we've got one for every award category, including Neville Bonner and early career as well. We encourage your nominees to watch those as well, because that covers all the specifics of applying for the award, and these are kind of bonuses to help them create a stronger nomination. So that series was all presented by committee chairs and past winners. There's also on the website a 30-minute workshop that was recently conducted in South Australia through Sanpen by Sally Kift, a long-standing AUT committee member and chair. And so that's another great resource that focuses on building evidence, and that's another great session to refer your nominees to. So I'll be sending placeholders out to these sessions shortly, and we encourage you to forward the invitations to anyone in your institution who may be interested in applying. We'll also be having just a really informal ICO coffee catch-up for anyone who's available on Thursday, 24th of July, just to come together, chat about how you're going with the process, perhaps share challenges and work through things. So just to have a bit of camaraderie, because many of you are going through the same experience, all at different institutions. So that sums up the first section of this presentation. We're right on time, which brings me a great delight to introduce Emeritus Professor Pip Pattison, who has kindly joined us today to share with you from the perspective of from an award committee chair what makes an AUT nomination stand out. So Pip has held numerous leadership roles and has stewarded educational transformation across Australia's longest standing institutions. And after retiring from her role as Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education at the University of Sydney, Pip continues to be actively engaged in higher education and, luckily for us, AUT. So with her extensive experience as the chair of the Teaching Award Committee for the past 4 years, she brings great expertise in what makes an application stand out. And so while her comments will naturally focus based on her experience in the teaching awards in particular, these tips can be applied across all award types. So welcome, Pip, and thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Danny, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And can I also begin by thanking the ICOs for all the work that they do in nudging great teachers to put in an application, encouraging them, and also supporting them in the process. We really do appreciate your role in all of this, and everything you can do to encourage more nominations will be really appreciated. On to my first slide. I think in a way this just sums it up, and it's not very, I think you probably all know it, but we really do look for applications that do address all of the subcategories with compelling evidence against each of the assessment criteria, but that also convey in a compelling way the educator themselves, their philosophy, their aspirations for their students, their approach to teaching, and the impact that they have, and including getting a sense of what it's like to be in their classes. And of course, we're also looking for sustained commitment and excellence when it comes to the teaching awards, really just addressing the criteria for the relevant award category. But that part about the story, the narrative, is really, really important in order to allow the quality of the applicant to shine through. Data, of course, and evidence are very useful, but it's the way it fits together that adds a great deal to the application. If it all flows seamlessly, fits with the philosophy, fits with the approach, fits with the outcomes for students, that's really what we're looking for. It's the complete package. Perhaps the next slide. Now, I did a terrible thing just before this started. I thought I'd made a mistake on the teaching award categories. So just block out of your mind that final category under the discipline categories. There is no multidisciplinary category for the teaching awards. But we've already seen these slides. And as Angeline and Danny have set out, across all of the different awards, there are sort of different categories and slightly different criteria. The detail of that is probably something you're all very familiar with. So let's go on to the next slide. The subcategories, of course, for the teaching awards are very important. For the citations also, where applicants select one of these to address in detail. For the teaching awards, all four need to be addressed. And of course, with all the four assessment criteria, it is quite a complex task to make sure that you can cover the bases of each criterion in relation to each subcategory, and also weave it into a coherent story, as I was describing earlier. It does require some effort and skill, but of course, a good educator, they'll tell their story. They're good at it because they do it on a regular basis, and they think about the impact of what that they're having on students and peers. And as I'll say in a moment, we think it's actually quite a useful thing to do. It would be useful for everyone to write an application, to be honest, every year. But, well, perhaps not every year, but from time to time, it's a great opportunity to sit down and think about how your teaching does indeed address these four aspects of teaching, all of them very important. How you go about approaching the teaching and learning process, how you develop criteria and resources and services that sit around those, approaches to assessment, and the innovative nature of what you do and/or the leadership that you provide that influences and enhances learning, possibly beyond your own classes. All of these are important. The next slide. These are just the familiar teaching award assessment criteria. One of the things that we found over the years is that some applicants don't do such a great job on criterion D. I think we've probably mentioned this before if you've been in one of these sessions. There is less of a tendency to situate approaches to teaching within the scholarly literature. And it is a valuable thing to do, not least because it allows you to see where the experience that you're putting in place, it differs from that of others, and also it allows you to learn if you're finding something different from others in the field. So it is a very useful professional activity to locate practice in relation to what is more broadly known about teaching. But all four criteria are clearly important. And I think if I had to comment on where we've seen a bit less development over the last couple of years, probably criterion C. I think there was an explosion of innovation, especially around technology and relational practices a couple of years ago, and I think there was just a bit less of that in the last year or so. So we're still very interested to see innovation, imagination, creativity in the classroom. On to the next slide. So what are the things that we see that sometimes reduce the effectiveness of an application? First of all, that lack of coherent narrative. That is definitely If it's there, it's a real plus. If it's not there, it means that the application doesn't really stand out as excellent in what is generally a very competitive field. I think probably everybody who puts in an application for a teaching award is an excellent teacher. So the challenge is really to present, that for the educator to present themselves as excellent by being able to, give that more detailed sense of what it's like to be in their classroom. And sometimes it's a matter of evidence as well. So if there might be some evidence about student satisfaction, but perhaps none about actual learning, or there might be some evidence about improved performance, but no sense of what it's like to be in the classroom. We also find, so that's the restricted evidence of student experience and impact. For folks who are leading teachers, there is often a capacity to influence the field more broadly, and in fact many very successful applications have not only contributed in a way that impacts the students they teach directly, they've also had impacts on learning within their own institution, or often as well, they're recognised experts and they engage in a lot of professional development activity in their own discipline. There were some excellent examples of that last year, for example. Some applications also fail to sort of work their way around that 4x4 of subcategories and criteria for the teaching awards. We really do look for balanced. You don't have to be an absolute star at all of them, all 16 options in the teaching awards, or all 4 in the citations, but certainly the panels are looking for broad excellence in the relevant set of criteria. And I've just mentioned the scholarly literature is something that sometimes gets overlooked as an important point to address. And then every now and then, and this always breaks our hearts, there's limited evidence of sustained commitment. So this can be, I think, we're looking for some years, 3 years of practice, sustained practice for the teaching awards. The other categories will differ a little. Next slide. And what does a great application look like? Well, we don't know for sure, but they generally come across as very well planned, and we suspect that's taken time. And they're often very clear in the role of reflection in improving teaching practice, and they often tell a good story about how one thing led to another. So they tried this, that happened, thought about it, suggested doing it slightly different. So those kinds of stories about learning as an educator, as a professional, are quite important to include. And I think to the extent that applicants can take the time to actually share their drafts with peers, with ICOs perhaps, I'm not quite sure what happens in your institutions, but to get a little bit of feedback to find out what works in the minds of a reader who hasn't been spending time telling the story, but they can talk about how the story is being received. That can often lead to an improved application. We see many, and indeed, it's a marker of, it's an evidence of its own right, that an applicant has been a successful participant in internal award programs, and often they've already gained some skill in writing the narrative that's required for the application through that process. We think, and this is perhaps less evidence that it's not essential, but in many cases, individuals who are successful have indeed been successful in other awards. They've been promoted for their efforts as educators. They participate in professional development and contribute to the professional development of others through peer mentoring programs, etc. They may have received discipline awards or institutional awards of some sort, or they may have engaged with the scholarly literature. All of those things we think benefit from the opportunity to sit down and reflect and write about your aspirations and achievements as an educator. So we do think there's a great deal of synergy in participating in the application process. There are rewards of many kinds that come from that, including you get new ideas about what you're going to do in your classes in future classes. So that's important. Obviously, it's also important to have gone through whatever processes you've put in place in the institution to support applicants. They will vary from institution to institution, but we know you provide a lot of support, and yes, we encourage applicants to use that. The websites that Danny and Angeline have mentioned are obviously important, and there is a lot of material now on those websites. But I get back to the narrative. That clear story about a person's aspirations, philosophy, rationale is important, as well as the evidence about the learning experience and the impact for students, and in some cases peers and others in your field. And yes, above all, the evidence against all of the assessment criteria does need to be there, but it needs to be there in a way that is coherently interleaved with the philosophy, aspirations, rationale, etc. I hope that makes sense. On to the next slide. Here's a few examples that the team has put together of how people are using evidence in different ways, drawing on the literature, explaining the data, using a mix of quantitative and qualitative data. Qualitative data gives you a sense of the sort of overall amount of impact. The qualitative data can often give you a much finer sense of how the learning experience is actually experienced by the students, and where that fits with the philosophy of the educator. That can be very compelling. So triangulation. Then, benchmarking where possible, and especially on, the learning outcomes for students, possibly performance subsequently, whether in career or further courses. That can be compelling as well, although it's often hard to get. But there are lots of creative ways in which people can put the information together and make the story compelling and well aligned with their philosophy. I think we've got one more example. Yes, this is more sort of qualitative, but still contains, a mix of styles, different independent sources, all triangulating in one another, students, peers, and different kinds of impacts, whether experiential or in terms of sort of harder measures of learning. Students going on to do great things, etc. On to the next slide. For the teaching awards, and I think for all of the awards, there's certain supporting materials that are required. The details may vary from award program to award program, but they're clearly laid out on the website. As Angeline mentioned, there's been some changes to the arrangements for the videos, but everything else looks the same, except if we move on to the next slide. Oh yes, other things to be aware of. As I've tried to emphasize, panels do pay attention to the coherence of the narrative and evidence. very importantly, many of the award winners win on a second or later attempt. That is, they actually get great feedback. They're often very good and very clearly good, but they get great feedback on their first round through, and they come back and present a very successful application on subsequent attempts. So that's a really important message to get to applicants, that they're in the awards are competitive. Many winners win on a later attempt, and it's not to do necessarily with the quality of what they're doing, it's how effectively they can convey that in the application. Mentioned the resources before, and can I also say that having been involved in the process recently as chair, but before that as a panel member, the process has been honed over a number of years, and it does now yield a very consistent level of judgment. There's still deep discussion where there is some disagreement, and I think that process in itself is a very important way in which the quality of the assessment process is maintained. But by and large, it is remarkable how consistent the judgments now are because of the effort that's gone in over the years to establishing those assessment matrices and the sort of multi-stage process. Then on to the next slide. I just did want to mention the 2024 round, where you will have seen from the graphs that there were fewer applications for the teaching awards, and we ended up making fewer awards. We don't know why that was so, whether just simply the fewer number of applications meant that there were fewer genuinely high quality applicants. But there was also a template change in 2024, I think, which may have inadvertently led to an emphasis on the criteria over and above the narrative. The team has actually removed that template now because we were a bit concerned that that made it very difficult to present the narrative without sort of too many constraints. It was a bit of a straitjacket. So we hope that is helpful, because we really do want to emphasise that it's the coherence between the narrative and the meeting of the criteria, the evidence to support that is important in this process, not just being able to produce the evidence and put it into 16 different boxes in the case of the teaching awards, or 4 different boxes for the citations. And then finally, once again, I hope you are able to encourage as many applications as you can from your outstanding teachers. We know there's lots and lots of them across all of our institutions, and we'd really love to see them participate in this process and be recognised for their great work. So thank you. I think that's the last slide. Yes, so questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pip. Anyone has any question? Hasti, I saw your questions about the nomination templates. Basically, as we encourage the nominees to still use headings, subheadings, follow the claims against assessment criteria on page 10 of the citation guidelines. And I think ultimately, as what are the flows that work out best for the nominees? And do bear in mind that the headings and subheadings will have to be clearly labeled so that it's easier for the assessors to assess the application as well. Anybody else has any questions? You could raise your hand.
Thanks very much, Angeline. So does it mean that if, for example, they're applying for citation award and we've got these 4 criteria, do they put each criteria themselves and address it underneath it, or the narrative can be written in a way that it's like a story addressing all criteria just throughout, rather than just addressing each criteria separately?
I think in my memories, I still see a lot of addressing each of the criteria. so that it's easier for the assessors to assess and know that what you've addressed is actually based on those criteria.
Yeah, clearly signposting is important. That's something that's come through from the assessors for several years, and which is why the nomination templates were introduced at a time a couple of years ago to try and help nominees to kind of do that. But as Pip's mentioned, particularly with the teaching award, because there's 16 different sections to address, it just ended up being too incoherent. However, with the other two, it is kind of 4. There is an ability to kind of have more of a flow while addressing the criteria, but essentially we'll leave it up to the individual nominees, but it is important to clearly kind of signpost and maybe just bold where they're addressing each criteria. That will help the assessors as well to find it, but it's a little bit more flexible now.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks, Hasti.
There's a great question from Seb.
Yes, thank you. I thought I'll leave it in the chat.
So I'm just reading through it now.
No worries.
I think that has always been the questions that were being raised since day one about some institutions or states that are bigger and have that capacity to engage consultants in to do it. But what we are doing here in the AAUT team is that we are doing our very best to fill in the gaps and to support the nominees. And that is why we actually have the mentor systems where we invite the past recipients to mentor the nominees. And also this year, we are introducing like very specific topic PD sessions to support the nominees so that they are not left on their own. And that is also why we have sessions like this, where the chair of the teaching awards committees, like Pip, is able to share, what are her observations, what are the good tips, what are the things to be aware of. So we're doing whatever we could to fill up that gaps.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And no, my question is quite provocative as well. And I guess it's more of a recent trend that I've seen in our industry more broadly, that we've seen a rise in consultants. And this is not just within the university sector alone. We can see this throughout the government. And with this kind of real exponential increase of consultants, and I had this in a really polite way, if the AAUT, and perhaps is the question when the professor comes back, is would they be open for perhaps even just a letter of disclosure, or much like a conflict of interest, that this was supported with the help of an external consultant, that allows, I guess, on your end to know which universities had support and which doesn't, but also allows universities that don't have those deep pockets to kind of, and to show that, look, we're doing our best where we can. I just thought, look, it's something that's it's been a concern, and it's kind of come up more recently in different pockets that I've heard from Sandpen and in other pockets around the university sector. And yeah, it's more broadly a question, would AAUT consider developing a disclosure statement in regards to consultants? Look, I'm not saying if they're good or bad. I think that's a question up to the universities and their executives. But I think at the very least, the disclosure of that it allows us to know who has got additional support and who is only gaining support from the ICOs within those retrospective universities. So thank you for your time and your question. And I know that it's a very difficult and complex question, so I don't assume that you might have the answer now, just perhaps a food for thought for later.
Yeah, thanks, Seb. I'll make a note of it. Don't have the answers, but I'm happy to bring it back to the awards committees, because we are on it constantly work on improving the award. So let me bring this back to the committees and have a chat with them just to gather their thoughts. Joe, I could see you raise a hand.
Yeah, just thinking about that expertise building and wondering whether the AAUT might consider, with the assessment process, allowing assessors to have a shadow or mentor somebody else during the assessment process to build that capacity through the sector, because some of us have been assessors multiple times, and some other people in our institutions, we'd love to help build capacity, but of course the confidentiality requirements mean that we just absolutely can't as part of the round. We can only do it, with our local winners and show what we've done there. So I wondered whether that might assist with some of that expertise sharing, within or across universities. I think Seb's question is really tricky because there are people I know who have lots of expertise in this who are only too willing to provide support for free to people. And then you've got the paid consultants. So it's a really difficult one to resolve.
Yeah.
It is. So Joe, just to clarify, so you're talking about assessors being mentor to other assessors within the institutions or outside the institutions?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, for example, somebody who's an experienced assessor might for a round have somebody who could shadow their assessment process, also sign the privacy and confidentiality arrangements, but really, be looking at what that assessment process involves, what the kind of standard of the applications are that are being assessed, but not be an assessor themselves. And perhaps, that's developing their capacity to be an assessor the following year, but also to bring that knowledge back into their own institution if nobody in their institution has had that experience.
Yeah, that I think is sort of like echoing what we were thinking as well. They have not been publicized yet. It's just in my, in our thinking thought as thinking about setting up a team lead, like you say, those experienced assessors as mentor to the less experienced mentor. So besides the mentor program for nominees, it was just in my brain this week about, hey, perhaps you could do that. So thank you. I'll take that sort of like on board and have a bit more discussions internally. And definitely, yes, like I mentioned, the team, we are looking at trying to fill that gap. And the whole objective is very much as that whole development piece as well for not just nominees, but mentors, for team lead assessors to new assessors as well. And over the years, I have heard many assessors coming back, sharing stories about how thankful they were to be in that assessment panel because they learned so much from the others. And that brought us to think about, yes, perhaps we could do that. Thank you. We will definitely bring that to Angela as well. And as a team, we discuss how we can execute and bring that to life.
Thanks for the suggestion, Joe. Any other questions?
Sorry, could I ask one more question?
Sure.
So you mentioned the mentor support. Just wondering if the institutions provide internal mentors, would the nominees still be able to just approach one of the mentors from the list and just contact them directly?
That's right.
Or is it just for institutions who do not have the internal mentor, the resources?
No, it's open to anyone, any applicants who are looking at applying for AUT. They can go in, and on that, thank you, Marlene, for sharing the website. You can search based on discipline, what type of award they've applied for in the past, and we've checked with everyone to make sure they're still happy to be on our database. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone if they do get a request coming through. Some of them might have capacity for 1 or 2, so it will really just be up to their availability, but we recommend that nominees reach out to potential mentors directly. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And to add on to Danny, we actually checked with the mentors on a yearly basis just to make sure that they're happy to be on the list to be mentors.
Yeah, so they're all keen and ready to help. And I think we added about 6 or 7 again from last year's successful recipients, so really keen to give back and help this next round. So there's a few new ones on there who've had the experience fresh in their mind, whether they've applied once or twice before. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, we've got Pip here to share her expertise. None for now. We do have a couple more slides, so I'll just go back to sharing just to recap the key dates. Alrighty, Angeline, leave it to you.
Yep, sure. So Pip, thank you so much for making time. And we really appreciate your insightful presentations and your valued supports to the awards throughout the years. Thank you, Pip.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And here I am just reminding you of the key dates. The nominations is opening on the 25th of August and closing on the 10th of September. You might realize that we're closing it a bit later just because we kick off the program a bit later this year as well. And then the next nomination is actually for the Career Achievement Awards from 27th of October to 14th of November. Okay, next slide. All right, so on behalf of the AAUT teams, a heartfelt thank you to all the ICOs for your continued support and being so patient with us all these years. And now it is time for our team photo. So could I just please